Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify, and when you want to take conversations with your fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions, and best of all, it's totally free. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim. Championship weekend. We're going to be doing picks. We're going to take a look at the transfer portal a little bit, as well as do some commentary on some of the Big Ten awards. Some of them make a lot of sense. Some of them make no sense. We'll be talking about that. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify. Leave a review. Share this thing with your friends. We've had a real uptick in terms of listenership over the past few weeks, and a lot of that is because you guys share and you comment and you repost, and keep doing that, guys. I really appreciate you all. We'll also get to a few comments that you guys have made. Again, really appreciate you guys. Hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. We're going to get right into it with championship weekend. I'm going to just do the Power 5 games. Like, no offense to New Mexico State and Liberty. I don't care. I just wouldn't be able to break it down at all. So we're going to start Friday night, 8 o'clock on ABC. You have number 5, Oregon, versus number 3, Washington. Really, it's a play-in game for the playoff. Pac-12 championship. Oregon is a 9.5-point favorite. Remember, Washington won at Washington by, I believe, by 3 points earlier in the season. A lot of people, I think, just have a belief that Oregon is going to win this game, right? Oregon's a 9.5-point favorite, despite the fact that Washington won earlier this season. And I think a big part of it is, like, Washington's kind of limped down the stretch. Like, they've really limped along. You know, they only won by 2 against Oregon State. They struggled a bit against in-state rival Washington State last week. Meanwhile, you look at Oregon, you know, they crushed Oregon State by 24 last week. I think Bo Nix playing at a really high level. Washington has been limping along, you know, the past few weeks. Struggled against Stanford, struggled against USC, struggled against Utah. So, you know, the past 8 games, their largest margin of victory has been 10 points. You compare that to Oregon. Oregon has been dominant, but I think here's my issue with Oregon is, outside of Oregon State, they really haven't played anybody except Washington, who they lost to. And so I think there's a bit of smoke and mirrors with Oregon, because I do think they're tough up front. I think Bo Nix is playing at a very high level right now. You know, I think the loss inspired them. But, you know, you look at their schedule, you know, they also struggled a bit against USC, only won by 9. They beat Oregon State at home. It's a rivalry game, but also Jonathan Smith took the Michigan State job the day after that game. So you have to believe that he was kind of eyeing his way out the door. And so how much of this game and how much of Oregon's success is rooted in the fact that maybe they're more equipped to blow out bad teams, and also how much of it was Oregon State had just lost a heartbreaker to Washington, and then their coach is kind of looking to jump ship. I don't know. I think it's really hard to win twice in a row. But I think Washington is equipped to handle Oregon. I think they have enough on defense to slow them down. And I love Penix and his weapons. Romadunze and Polk, and they've got a good running game, or a good enough running game. I think Washington shocks everybody and gets it done. I like Washington, very similar score, 37-31 over the Ducks. I think it's a classic. I think it might be the best game of the weekend. So I really am excited about this game. I'll be tuned in on Friday night. Washington over Oregon with the upset. The non-upset, they're ranked higher. So we're going to go with Washington by 6. Saturday, December 2nd, 12 p.m. kick on ABC. It's number 18 Oklahoma State versus number 7 Texas. Texas is a 15.5-point favorite. I'll put it this way. I think any chance for Ohio State to get to the playoff died when Oklahoma State got in the Big 12 championship game over Oklahoma. Texas is not going to lose to Oklahoma State. Texas is going to throttle them. I just think they're too strong up front. Their line play, it's really about the line play. As like Texas has great skill positions, right? Xavier Worthy, really good receiver. I think Quinn Ewers has really improved as a quarterback over the season. But this game is about the trenches. I like Texas big, 38-10 over Oklahoma State. They just shut them down. 4 p.m. kick on CBS, number 1 Georgia against number 8 Alabama. Georgia's a 5.5-point favorite. I really, really don't want to pick this game, because every time I pick against Georgia, they win. And every time I pick for Georgia, I'm either wrong and they lose, or it's much closer than I think it's going to be. Like I picked that Georgia would destroy Ohio State last year in the Peach Bowl, and it was a 1-point game. And so I honestly don't know what to think about this game, because I think Alabama has really improved over the season. Listen, don't get hoodwinked into the Auburn game and think, oh, Alabama's not that good. They've played a better schedule, particularly on defense. I know people will look at the rankings and be like, well, Georgia played Tennessee, and Georgia played Missouri, and Georgia played this. Listen, those defenses are not very good. Missouri's a really good team, but they're, it's Missouri, like as a program. Georgia played Ole Miss. They don't have a good defense. Alabama has played better defenses. They played Texas. I know they lost to Texas, but they played Texas. They're a better defense. I think Alabama might be more equipped to handle Georgia's defense than Georgia is able to handle Alabama's defense. That on top of Jalen Milroe, I just think Jalen Milroe is a game changer at quarterback. I think he's grown up a bit. I think he'll be able to handle the pressure. I've said this ever since Alabama lost to Texas, and everybody said Alabama's out of the playoff, Alabama's in trouble, yada, yada, yada. I think Alabama wins. I think Alabama wins 31-24. I'll be honest, I think Alabama wins the playoff. That's my pick going into this. And honestly, the winner of the SEC championship game is my playoff winner. But I think Alabama has too much. I think they're I think they're going to do a good job of limiting Brock Bowers. I think Carson Beck has been really good for Georgia, but I just think Alabama has a little bit too much. And so because I'm picking Alabama, Georgia's going to win, but I got Alabama 31, Georgia 24, and which is going to make the playoff selection just absolutely miserable. And we'll get to that in a minute. Louisville, number 14, Louisville at number 4, Florida State, not at, it's in Charlotte, North Carolina. Florida State's a 2.5-point favorite. This is despite the fact that Jordan Travis is not playing. Rodemeyer, I think, is the backup quarterback. He's in. I think a lot of people just kind of assume that Louisville's going to upset Florida State because of the quarterback issue. And Louisville's been really, like, they've been hot and cold. Like, they lost to Kentucky last week. They lost to Pitt, but they beat Notre Dame. They beat, they've had greater margins of victory against certain teams over Florida State, and that was with Jordan Travis. And so I think this is a trickier game than people realize. I think people just kind of assume Louisville's going to beat Florida State. It's a tough ask because I think Louisville is dynamic on offense, and Jeff Braun is I think he's an offensive wizard. I think he's a guy that can scheme up an offense. I think Jack Plummer has been a really good quarterback for them. I just, I think people forget Florida State's ability on defense. Remember, they limited LSU early in the season to 24 points. That's a tall task. I think their athleticism on the lines is I think people have forgotten that. And so I think Florida State has a ton on offense without their quarterback? No, although I think they have a good running game, good receivers. Keon Coleman has been really good for them. And this is going to make it hard for the committee, I think Florida State wins. I got 27-17. I just don't think Louisville's going to be able to handle the line play, the defensive line, for Florida State. And I think that will cause chaos. As good as Jeff Braun is as an offensive mind, I think Jake Plummer has been not Jake. I think I'm getting the first name wrong. Whatever Plummer quarterback is at Louisville. I just think that Florida State's line play is going to be too much up front, and it's going to wreck everything. Florida State wins 27-17. That's my pick there. And then, of course, the Big Ten championship game, 8 p.m. on Fox. Michigan is a 21.5-point favorite against Iowa. It's number 2 versus number 16. I think there is a pathway for Iowa to make this close and to junk things up for Michigan. But I think everything becomes a problem if Michigan is able to get the first score, because then it forces Iowa to have to play from behind. And I think that's when things can unravel. They squeeze. And so I think this is a close game at half. Maybe like 10-3. But I think Michigan pours it on in the second half. I got 38-6. I don't think Iowa. Iowa has shown some flashes as of late in their offensive ability, but I just don't think it's enough to really threaten just a very good Michigan defense. Caleb Braun, I think they're probably their best playmaker on the outside. I'm pretty sure he's out in this game. I just don't think it's going to be a close game when it's all said and done. So Michigan 38-6, which lends the question with the people that I've picked, who's in the playoff? And it's going to be weird because Alabama beating Georgia is tough, because especially if Texas wins and Washington wins and Florida State wins and Michigan wins, because then you got to leave a one-loss team out. And it's either going to be Alabama or it's going to be Texas. And Texas beat Alabama. And so here's what I think should happen in that scenario. If all this happens the way I'm saying, what I think should happen is Texas should obviously be in over Alabama because of head-to-head. Obviously. Here's what I think will happen. I think Michigan would be the 1 seed. I think Washington would be the 2 seed. I think Florida State would be the 3 seed. And I think Alabama will be the 4 seed. Or I could see where Alabama's the 3 seed and Florida State's the 4 seed and Texas gets left out. Which would stink and I would hate. But I think that's what the committee's going to do because of this whole notion of best team. I don't think you can leave out an undefeated Florida State. I just don't think you can. I think it's an awful precedent. And if they do, I think praise God they're going to 12 teams. But this committee has learned nothing about transparency and due process. And it's been true every year. It's like, how did you come up with the rationale for your rankings? And it's like, whose line is it anyway? Well, it's all made up and the points don't matter. Some weeks, strength of schedule matter. Other weeks, strength of schedule doesn't matter. It's eye test. And I'm just like, you can't keep flip-flopping your rationale. Sorry, you can't. And, just this past week, how they came out with rankings, and they just continue to just make crap up to justify who they want. And I'm telling you right now, they want the SEC champion in the playoff. And so Texas fans, I'm sorry, or Florida State fans, I'm sorry, although I think they're in a lot of danger if they leave out an undefeated ACC champ. Especially if Florida State has a big win over LSU. So, somebody's getting left out. I think it should be Alabama, but I don't think it will be because, the SEC is almighty. So that's ultimately what I think is going to happen. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it's not this difficult for them to figure it out. Typically there is something that happens that makes it easier. But we'll see. Hopefully this is, everybody has been saying, oh, the 12-team playoff, we don't need a 12-team playoff. Hopefully this is the scenario that helps people understand, oh, we need a bigger system. Yeah, you do. This is ridiculous that we have to pick between conference champions to say who's actually in the playoff. That's what I think is going to happen championship weekend. Let's talk about awards for a minute. Let's talk about awards. A lot of things I thought made a lot of sense for the Big Ten, right? Offensive Player of the Year, Marvin Harrison. I thought that made a lot of sense just with his statistics. Best receiver, had a ton of touchdowns. Biggest name. I think you could have made a case for a couple other players, but I think consistently week to week he was probably the best player on the field in the Big Ten. Defensive Player of the Year, I thought also made sense. Jazon Newton. I think you could have made a case for some other guys, but Johnny Newton is I think the biggest name, and I just thought that made a lot of sense for them. David Braun as the coach of the year, both by the coaches and the media. I just don't know who else you're going to put there. And I know Iowa fans and maybe even Michigan fans and Rutgers fans, you're all like, well, what about Schiano? What about Ferentz? What about Jim Harbaugh? I think Jim Harbaugh's easy. He was suspended for half the season. So I think he's disqualified. No offense, the culture he's built, for them to be able to get to the Big Ten championship after all that, really great. Sharon Moore should easily be the Broyles Award winner, but there's no way you can vote for him. I think Greg Schiano in any other year deserves it, and I think Kirk Ferentz. Listen, he went 10-2 with a lot of adversity, but a good chunk of that adversity was self-inflicted. So, good for Kirk Ferentz. He's one of the best coaches in Big Ten history. He wasn't going to win this award. David Braun, easily. With the circumstances, you want to talk about adversity. I've detailed it a lot on this podcast. No one's had more adversity than David Braun. He also dealt with injuries on the field. He dealt with quarterback issues. But more importantly, he had to win back a locker room. So I just think what he did going 7-5 when everybody thought they were going to go 1-11 or 2-10, or maybe even 0-12, just great. So I thought that made sense. Quarterback of the year, J.J. McCarthy. I think the only other person you could have suggested there was Talia Tagovailoa, and you're going to go with the guy who won the conference. So good by McCarthy. Thought he had a really good season. Running back of the year, I have issues with. I see the argument for Blake Corum, 22 touchdowns. I just think Kyle Monangai at Rutgers is the only running back in the Big Ten that eclipsed 1,000 yards. And not only did he not get running back of the year, he wasn't voted as a first-team running back, which I just thought was odd. Just what he did for that team, getting them to 6-6, and he missed some time too. So I just don't agree. He was second team All Big Ten, both by the coaches and the media. But I just don't agree with that. I don't agree with it. I think it should have been Monangai. I like Blake Corum. I think he had a really good season. But I just didn't think he was as good as a year ago. And I think it felt more like a legacy award than it was for this year. So it would have been it was tight. I'm probably more salty that Monangai didn't get first team All Big Ten than he didn't get running back of the year. As I'm processing this live, Yankee Wolverine is probably, how could you say Blake Corum? Blake Corum, he 22 touchdowns is significant, and that deserves some recognition. So I'm talking myself into this. I think Blake Corum. I'm more salty about Monangai not getting first team All Big Ten than I am in terms of running back of the year. Tight end of the year, Cade Stover, that made sense. Offensive lineman of the year, Olu Fashanu. It's splitting hairs. I probably would have put Zach Zinner there from Michigan. I just don't. I'm not sure. I think Fashanu had great moments, but I thought in maybe the biggest games he had moments of struggle against guys like Tui Moloau. But again, I don't think you're going to go wrong with going with Fashanu. He had a great season. Jer'Zhan Newton was defensive lineman of the year. You can't put him as the defensive player of the year and then say someone else is better than him at defensive line. Here's where I have a major issue. Linebacker of the year, Tommy Eichenberg. I'm a Buckeye through and through. he wasn't even a first-team All Big Ten linebacker this year. Part of it was he missed time. But I think other guys had much better seasons. I think you can make an argument that Jay Higgins out of Iowa, Aaron Casey out of Indiana, Abdul Carter out of Penn State, the linebackers from Michigan, Mike Barrett and Junior Colson, I thought all had better seasons. I thought that was a name recognition award. And so I love Eichenberg. I think he had a much better season a year ago. But I just don't agree. I don't agree with that. Cooper DeJean for defensive back of the year. I have no problems with it. I think you could have picked, Tyler Nubin or Denzel Burke, especially because DeJean missed the last couple games. But Will Johnson out of Michigan, you could have picked Mike Sanders still. But ultimately, I don't have a big issue with that. I thought that made sense. Torrey Taylor, punter of the year, agreed. Most valuable player for Iowa. There's a couple other awards I just don't feel like I have enough to comment on with kicker and freshman. And I'm not going to comment on those just because I just don't feel like I have enough there to talk about. Really, my only other qualms here, there's the coaches as well as the media, and as typical, I think the coaches probably get it right more than the media. So the media for first team, both the coaches and the media had I'm just looking this over here again. I thought the coaches did a better job with the offensive line. So the coaches had Drake Nugent, Zach Zinner, Donovan Jackson, Ladarius Henderson, and Olu Fashanu for their first team selections. I think it's, I agree with a lot of that. I have major issues with Donovan Jackson for Ohio State. And I know part of it you're trying to spread the love a little bit. He wasn't even the best guard on Ohio State's team this year. I think, again, that's a name pick. And I think Donovan Jackson was actually unanimous for the coaches. And I just don't agree. Like, I just think there were other guys. I think another guy that I just had issues with and the media put in there is Josh Fryer. I have a lot of issues with anybody on the offensive line for Ohio State being first team. I think Matt Jones, you could have said, I thought he had a pretty good season for Ohio State. But I just think there are other guys that you could have put on this. Josh Fryer should not be anywhere near the first or second team for Ohio State. I thought for the defense, again, I don't know if I would put Eichenberg at first team. I think the defensive backs makes a lot of sense. Although I'm honestly a bit surprised that Jordan Hancock isn't on the list. But I thought Tahib Still made sense in second team. Sanders Still made sense second team. Kalen King. There's a lot of good defensive backs in this league. So, Penn State had a lot of guys on this list. Michigan obviously had a lot of guys on this list. So I don't have major issues on the defensive side of the ball. But again, and Mason Graham was on here for first team. I would have put Kenneth Grant as well on the first team, probably over JT Tuimoloau. Again, name recognition. But Kenneth Grant was a monster this year, and I thought he was maybe the best defensive tackle in the country, besides Jason Newton. Not a lot of major issues with the all Big Ten teams, but it's hard. And sometimes you just gotta. It's like, who am I going to pick? Well, I'm going to pick the guy I know, and so that's why I think Eichenberg is on there at times, and Tuimoloau. It makes sense, but I'm sensitive to it too as an Ohio State guy. I'm like, I don't think this is as good as you think it is. But that being said, real quick, I'm just going to talk about transfer portal stuff. Transfer portal officially opens at December 4th, which means the fact that people are already committing to other schools is weird. Probably not good. Probably not good. Probably some tampering going on, but we're just going to go with what we know so far. This is as of the 28th. Obviously, the most players transferring so far coming out of schools with the most coaching transition. So if you look at Indiana, there's a lot of players leaving. And the biggest one probably is Carter Smith, offensive tackle for them. You know, the other big one, Brandon Sorsby, who is their guy at quarterback. And there's 2 quarterbacks in the portal for them. But overall, 12 players right now that have declared for the portal, which is just really, really interesting. You go to Iowa, only 1. It's Spencer Petras, which I didn't even realize he was still on the team. That makes a lot of sense with their quarterback situation. Maryland, only 1 player so far, Kobe Thomas. Michigan State, where there's a lot of turnover because of coaching. You have 8 players so far, including both Caton Hauser and Sam Levitt. And I think I saw that Kim is also possibly transferring. I heard somewhere that all their quarterbacks are transferring out. So that'll be some work for Oregon State. I wonder how much Jonathan Smith tries to get some of his Oregon State guys to come at quarterback. Minnesota, not a lot, but I was shocked to see that Kaliak Manis is transferring. Like, I don't know. I didn't think anyone was going to threaten his job, but I wonder if PJ had a conversation with him and said, hey, you're not it, or if he just doesn't like the culture. I don't want to speculate, but I was just shocked to see that both he and another quarterback, Drew Viato, is transferring out. Purdue also surprisingly has a lot of guys transferring out, and you just wonder if maybe they're like, we see the culture that Ryan Walters is, we see the offense that he's trying to put together, and we just don't like it. A lot of wide receivers transferring. And it's not like, I don't think they're wide receivers that are getting beat out, right? TJ Sheffield, Deion Burks. Deion Burks was one of their most explosive players. So I'm shocked to see those guys leaving. 4 wide receivers are transferring. A couple of defensive linemen. I feel like that probably makes a little bit more sense probably to get playing time. But yeah, I'm surprised by that. And Rutgers has Gavin Rupp transferring. So clearly they're all in on Gavin Wimsatt. Ohio State has a guy going out, Amari Abar, who is a defensive lineman. Probably just saw the depth chart. It was like, I'm probably not going to get in here. So there's more, but that's all I'm seeing right now, at least according to Sports Illustrated. But I've heard of other ones going as well. We will keep this conversation ongoing. Last but not least, I want to just address just some comments and some things. First off, Yankee Wolverine, I mention him a lot. He left me a glowing review on Apple, and I'd encourage you guys to do likewise. But one of the things I appreciated was he mentioned both my excitement about the whole Big Ten, but also he addressed that I come in as a fan, as someone who's grown up with the Big Ten tradition, and not just as someone who, and because of that, I that's often how I offer takes, is both with knowledge of everything going on, but also as someone who has grown up as a Big Ten fan. And I just want to, I really appreciate your back and forth, even when we don't agree. But I really appreciate your feedback and your words. This is a place that I want to be. I want to cover every team in this conference, and I don't know every team as much as I would like to, and I'll be the first to own that. And I know Ohio State intimately just because I grew up in it, and because of that, I probably know Michigan and Penn State more because they tend to be the primary threats to Ohio State. But I love knowing about these other teams, and I love seeing what Rutgers is doing and what Northwestern is doing and how they're building. And I want to see teams like Minnesota and Nebraska and Illinois continue to build and grow. And I love seeing what Luke Fickell's doing at Wisconsin. And so all that being said, Yankee, I appreciate you. You've been an amazing support and listener. Another good friend of mine, this is a personal friend of mine, Tony Beard, he texted me about my comments about Franklin and what happens with him now that they've gone 10-2, but lost again to Ohio State, Michigan. One of the things he had mentioned to me, he texted me about this, is like, we feel like we're kind of in no man's land because 10-2 is a really good place to be, but also we want to get better. My good friend Chris Ebersol has said the same thing. What do we do? And I appreciate those thoughts because I think it's in some ways it's where Ohio State fans are with Ryan Day. And I think I'm probably going to have, I am going to have a podcast at some point detailing, I think, both those coaches, because I think both coaches are actually in a similar spot. Really good recruiting, at like 98% of other schools, or maybe 96% of other schools, would love to be in the position that Penn State and Ohio State are in. But what do we do? So, but I appreciate, you guys, Tony and Chris, you guys are personal friends of mine. You guys know how I feel about you. Appreciate you guys listening in, supporting the pod. And I just appreciate his brothers. So, but yeah, Sean on Spotify mentioned he wants to see me talk a bit more with I think it's Kevin who details Rutgers. I'm going to reach out to him. I appreciate you bringing that up. My hope as we continue to grow the pod is I'd love to continue to get more partnerships with other podcasters. And so I'm going to reach out to some folks over the off season and during bowl season to get more thoughts about other teams. My hope is even in doing that, I'm going to gain more knowledge about some of these other programs like Iowa. Had a great discussion with, I think it's Connor out of the Hawks Nest podcast through Big Banter Sports. Great guy, loves Iowa, and had some really good insight into Iowa. So, but my hope is to continue to do that more and more. So, all that being said, we're in it. Championship week. We're getting to postseason awards. We're going to do a bowl game special next week. Looking forward to what happens in the Big Ten. And in about a month, we're not going to be talking about 14 teams. We're going to be talking about 18 teams. So it's fun stuff here in the Big Ten. Thanks for following along. Appreciate you all. Again, leave a review. Share this thing with your friends. This has been the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. Take care. God bless.